They say a single picture is worth 1,000 words, and that may be true, but what happens when that picture has a 2 hour and 17-minute runtime? You get me walking out of Ryan Coogler's Sinners feeling like someone just rewired their brain. No joke, during the entire car ride home, my partner and I bantered back and forth on what we had just witnessed. This film goes beyond just entertainment. Sinners is a spiritual experience and a social commentary disguised as a vampire movie. You know those rare moments where art hits you so hard you feel physically different afterwards? That's what Sinners did for me, and I'm gonna break down how exactly Ryan Coogler managed to create something that feels both revolutionary and deeply rooted in traditions that Hollywood has been ignoring for decades. Just know, I can't talk about this without talking about spoilers, so if my editor can put something on the screen like, spoiler alert, because listen, I sat on this script for 2 weeks, so if you haven't seen it yet, I don't know what to tell you other than to come back when you've seen the film, because this is one of those rare cases where cinema mirrors reality. Now, admittedly, I walked into Sinners expecting another polished Ryan Coogler joint. I mean, after all, this is the same guy who brought us Black Panther, Fruitvale Station, and the Creed series. But what I didn't expect is what most would probably agree to be his magnum opus. The opening scene, it hits you with this unapologetic cultural specificity that most studio films would have watered down for the mass appeal. You know how Hollywood usually handles Black spirituality? They either make it some vague magical Negro trope or they dress it up in superhero costumes. But not here. Within 5 minutes, you're seeing Southern Black church traditions depicted with the kind of reverence that makes you realize nobody in the writer's room needed a cultural consultant. What I'm trying to say is, this film felt like it was made by us, for us.
FUBU runs the fashion world for real. FUBU, the look, the style, the vibe, the feel. FUBU, the clothes got mass appeal. They the best that ever did it, I'm just keeping it real.
And believe it or not, when I'm not masquerading around online as a Black Super Saiyan, in real life, I'm an actual Black man whose family has roots in Mississippi, so I think that makes me more than qualified for this conversation. Sinners wasn't just telling a story, it was punching up at the system funding its production budget. The writing does this thing where every line serves as dialogue and social commentary without turning it into some after-school special. Have you ever noticed how most films about race either preach to the choir or tone things down for white comfort? This one approaches things with empathy, but also with nuance. Here's a fun fact. A recent UCLA study found films with authentic cultural perspectives perform better with diverse audiences. Yet studios still treat specificity like some risky bet instead of what it actually is, which is good business and even greater art. Coogler knows this, which is why the music scene in the juke joint is top-tier content. When they recreated the various eras of music showcasing how they all have a certain type of spirituality and community to them that keep us connected as people, it gave me goosebumps, especially because that scene ends with the Irish vampires interrupting the party and attempt to insert themselves into the situation, a theme all too familiar in the Black community. See, we often create safe spaces for ourselves only for them to be invaded or gentrified by our white counterparts who don't always have our best interests at heart. And because we tend to be very welcoming people, contrast to what the media says, that can be a detriment to our own growth as a community. And that's why I think the portrayal of Stack and Smoke played by Michael B. Jordan was done so well. I mean, even these two characters were a metaphor for the good and the bad twin. Granted, neither one was 100% good, but we did learn throughout the film it was nothing Smoke wanted to be more than a father, not to mention he was the brains behind the juke joint, so he was trying to do better. What makes Sinners different is how it weaponizes film language itself. Most mainstream movies about Blackness gets filtered through the white gaze somewhere along the lines in production, but because Ryan had to put up a lot of his own money to get this film done, it doesn't happen here. Instead, Sinners flips that by making its core audience, Black people, feel seen first, but also doing just enough to make other groups of people feel seen if they paid attention to the various other themes the film had to offer. Because the reality is that everyone in this film was a sinner and everyone was a victim of the cycle of violence. Well, except for the Klan members, because fuck them. I mean, that last scene where Smoke got that Tommy gun kill streak and mowed their asses down was therapeutic for my Black ass. It reminded me of my favorite mission in Mafia 3.
Yeah. He's a demonstrator, decimated with a neighbor, hate an angel, apex predator, to claim your motherfucker, say a prayer, play the beat and paint a layer on the Blankets canvas, they just spray of blood. Hate to make acquaintances with niggas claiming they just for the love. Nah, I do it for the rush, it ain't nothing like killing beats and crushing mics, spilling heat and running through a trilogy with a precise ability and skill to ease and drop a nigga physically with sonic raw agility and punch him right in the fucking temple with a pencil, but a double as a hunting knife. Yeah.
Jokes aside, what I discussed earlier is the sneaky genius of cultural ownership. It's not about excluding people, but refusing to center their comfort while telling our story. You could tell this film was made by people who sat through one too many script meetings where the producer says things like, but yeah, how will middle America relate? The answer Sinners gives is they'll relate by listening for once. And even if you can't, at bare minimum, you'll still get some cool vampire action set in a unique time period. Ryan just added a little bit more meat on the bone. And an example being is how he handled assimilation. One of the biggest themes this film tackles that I felt flew over a lot of people's heads was the idea of assimilation. For those unaware, assimilation in regards to people is when a person or group of people do their best to fit into their new environment in exchange for their original culture. Sinners flips assimilation into outright horror. At first glance, you think it's just another period piece about black folks navigating white spaces, but by the third act, you realize it's a slow burn nightmare about what happens when you trade too much of yourself for survival and money. I think Stack and Smoke represent the duality of the black experience in America for many people. On one hand, you have Smoke, who was more clean-cut, methodical, and he was a former soldier. He handled a lot of the business and he did things a little bit more by the book, which would be textbook code switching. Then you had Stack, who was more hot-headed, slick-talking, and he dressed with flair. To me, he represented the black person who refused to assimilate, and it came with its own pros and cons. On one hand, he was great with dealing with his people because he was able to latch onto them emotionally. The interaction with Sammy driving and playing the guitar being a very good example. The only problem is his disdain for the other side would often get them in trouble. An example being how he was ready to shoot that Klan member when buying the juke joint. His feelings were valid, but he was so hot-headed he almost forgot he was in enemy territory. Including subtle stuff like this makes sense because studies have shown over 60% of black professionals report code switching fatigue. Having to play multiple characters around different people just to get by has been a thing that we've dealt with for the longest. But what I love is the fact that assimilation isn't just tackled through the lens of black people, but other characters like Mary, Remick, and the Asian couple. Representation was on full display in this movie, and I think it was done tastefully and accurately. Mary was a mixed black and white woman who wanted nothing more than to be down with the brown, but because she spent most of her time around white folks, she wasn't easily trusted by the black community. I think she had some of the best scenes in the film. There were multiple examples of assimilation. The first example being when Stack suggests Mary leaves the juke joint before she causes a scene, and Mary code switches by saying, boy, if you don't get the fuck up out my face. And then when they wouldn't let the Irish vampires in, she went outside to try to play the middleman, hoping that her fair skin would cause a cool over between both parties. I love this scene because it was a metaphor in itself. After going outside, she got bit and she kicked off all the vampire drama. The light-skinned woman was the downfall of the entire black community within the juke joint. My parents and grandparents used to always say, not all skin folk are your kinfolk. Now, if you're not picking up what I'm dropping, for those unaware, there is a deep distrust from some people within the black community of light-skinned black people like Mary. Yeah, she had good intentions, but sometimes that's not enough. What really matters is, are you enriched in black culture? It helps black folks know where your moral compass is in alignment with the black community, and it affects your decision making. See, mixed folks often catch themselves playing both sides, which can lead to some negative results. I'm not saying this is every light-skinned black person, but if you're black or you're mixed, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I say
she's biracial. She's a biracial girl. She's biracial. She's a biracial girl. She's a biracial girl. Made from a rainbow world. A pretty sight to see.
The Asian couple with the store was tastefully done as well, because I think there was some commentary there too. I think the commentary there was Asians have often planted their businesses in the black community to assimilate and grow wealth in America, but when stuff pops off, they don't always have our backs. Because Mary was the first to throw the team under the bus. Yeah, that's true, but the second was Grace. Her husband clearly had been turned into a vampire and he was surrounded by vampires, but she still took his side when shit hit the fan, ultimately leading to the downfall of the juke joint because they bust through the door. Now, does this mean there's no alignment between the black and Asian community in America? No. I mean, Wu-Tang's forever, guys. Come on, be for real. I also think this scene spoke to some black people because that's how some people feel about our relationship at times. This isn't the first time this social commentary has appeared. It also appeared in Jordan Peele's Get Out. I mean, why else do you think that Asian dude was sitting amongst them white folks at the dinner table? It's because often they get a seat at the table at the expense of the black community because unfortunately, sometimes they fall for the idea of the model minority. Hell, one of my best friends in high school was Vietnamese. I remember the first time I hung out at his house after school. I came over to play some 360 and his dad straight up told me I'm the first black person he ever let in his home because he thought a lot of us were criminals. Now I'm just sitting there as a 16-year-old with a stone face like, wow.
Thanks.
I think the last example of assimilation that flew over a lot of people's heads was Remick. Yeah, he was a vampire, but he was Irish. And that's why in the film, he tried to argue he related to everyone's struggle in the juke joint. That was in reference to Ireland being colonized by the British and them forcing him to assimilate into their culture. He was offering the people in the juke joint freedom by perpetuating the never-ending cycle of violence or sinning. I'd argue the only group of people who weren't trying to assimilate throughout this film were the Native Americans. They just showed up early in the film like,
"These white men are dangerous."
Now, granted, nobody listened, but I respect the fact that they kept it moving and they just minded their business. I'd argue they were the only one in the movie who didn't sin because I can't stress enough, outside of them, there was no real hero in this movie. Everyone was a sinner, stacking smoke with gangsters. The Klan was the Klan. That one dude was a drunk. Annie was using black magic. Cornbread was a glutton. Matter of fact, when he turned into a vampire, you notice how he was eating more than everybody else? There was heavy emphasis on that sin. The woman that sang that was in the bar with Sammy, she was cheating on her husband. Sammy, he was doing all kinds of shit disobeying his father. And what I loved about this movie is it doesn't really explain any of this. The writers just trust the audience. And to me, that's always a case for strong writing. An example being when the Native Americans pulled up and they tried to warn that couple about the vampire. Then the camera slowly pans to the Klan outfit that's inside of their house. That simple camera work insinuated it was no saving that couple from the vampire because they had invited evil into their home a long time ago. And if you remember what Sammy's dad said at the beginning of the film, you have to invite sin into your home first. See, when the writers trust the audience, movie buffs turn into yappers, and the casuals search up videos like this on YouTube to get a better grasp on things. Everybody wins, but it's not all social commentaries and metaphors. I mean, the action was solid too. The visual effects, the fighting, the sound design, and the cinematography all just felt like a labor of love. You sandwich that supernatural premise with awesome music and commentary on society, and you've got something really special here. But I think what wrecked me most was realizing assimilation isn't just about changing your speech. It's about rearranging your soul until you can no longer recognize it. Something Remick was a serious victim of because I think he had been dead for hundreds of years due to him mentioning Ireland's colonization, and that happened in the 15 and 1600s. See, Sinners doesn't let you look away from what's unraveling. It expects you to embrace it and think about it, but all while remaining fun and engaging. And I think that's because of how they incorporated the music. Music is the easiest and oldest way for filmmakers to manipulate the viewer's emotions. A sad violin here, an uplifting choir there, that's cool, but Sinners flips the script entirely. In this film, music isn't just background noise, it's a weapon, a survival tool, and a direct line to ancestry. From the jump, Coogler establishes sound as culture. The opening scene is literally music playing through different time periods while art is on display from different set groups of people. Music isn't simply a background in this film, but a tool to drive home plot points. The opening sequence in the church, which we later found out was the ending, the gospel music allowed Sammy to reconnect with his faith after a long night of getting his ass whooped by vampires. And when Sammy played the guitar for Smoke in the car, it allowed them to reconnect, which is something they were struggling to do, seeing as Sammy was the preacher boy dealing with someone from the criminal underground who had been away for some time. Basically, they came from two different walks of life, but the music allowed them to reconnect to one another. Now, as mentioned earlier, the best scene in the film was that juke joint scene. I mean, I was floating during this moment. I legit got goosebumps. The way the music shifts when the Irish vampires show up, it was genius. It goes from a celebration to a defense mechanism in seconds. And that's the real magic. Coogler understands black music has always been about duality, the joy and the pain. It's freedom and confinement. Even the instrumentation such as the guitars, the drums, the voices, none of it's just for show. Every note feels like it's echoing something ancestral. Like the songs themselves remember what the characters are struggling to hold on to while someone is trying to invade from the outside. And what gets me is how the sound design plays into this too. Listen to how the dialogue drops out during key musical moments. It's like the film is trying to say, this is the real conversation happening here. And did you notice how the white characters barely engage with the music unless they were trying to control it? That's not accidental. There's a meta commentary there. I mean, the film's set in a juke joint, a literal black space where music was considered a defiance, but the danger comes when outsiders want to sanitize it. It mirrors how black artistry gets commodified, stripped of its context, and sold back to us as something more easily digestible. The vampires didn't just want blood, they wanted the sound too. And what seals it for me is the lack of traditional heroes theme. I mean, most blockbusters hand the protagonist some soaring, reoccurring theme song, but here, the music belongs to the community. Even Smoke's big moments are underscored by a shared sound. It's subtle, but it matters because Sinners isn't about one man's triumph, it's about what survives when everything else tries to kill it. And to me, that is freaking dope. So when people call this film's soundtrack good, just know they're underselling it. This isn't just background music, it's the unseen character holding the story together. And that's actually why I pre-ordered the vinyl. I needed that in my collection. But enough enough about my collection. Instead, let's move on to the next topic, which is this is a film that features sin without villains. So here's the thing about Sinners that most people miss. As stated earlier, there aren't any real villains in this movie, at least not in the traditional sense. And I think that's what makes this film hit different. It makes you think. I mean, early on, you think you got the moral alignment figured out. I mean, the twins and their crew are supposed to be the good guys and the vampires are the bad guys, right? But then the film starts peeling back layers and suddenly you're just sitting there questioning who's really at fault. Take Remick, for example. Dude's clearly the antagonist, but the more you learn about him, the more you realize he's just another victim in the never-ending cycle. He didn't just wake up one day deciding to be evil. The film shows you glimpses of his past and how he was turned against his will and how he's been stuck in this predatory existence for centuries. When he talks about what happened to his people, that wasn't just exposition. It was Coogler showing us how monsters get made. The real villain here isn't any one character. It's the systems we're all trapped in. The racism, the poverty, the generational curses that nobody asked for. And because of it, the entire film felt like a play for Sammy's soul. And that's why the twins asked if Sammy's dad beat him. The twins' dad was an evil man who passed down the generational curse to smoke and stack, whereas Sammy was just a church boy tempted by the sexier things that come with being a bad boy. I love that scene at the top of the juke joint. I can't remember which twin it was, but either Smoke or Stack tried to warn Sammy about their lifestyle. It reminded me a lot of that kid in the hood who was super smart or good at basketball, and the dope boys would try to keep him on the right path because they believed in him. They knew if Sammy walked their path, it wouldn't end up anywhere positive. I mean, look at that scene where Smoke goes on his revenge spree against the Klan. He rips off his protection and he just gets to work. But it's not framed as some triumphant hero moment. Instead, the camera stays tight on his face, and you can see that exact second he realizes he becomes what he hates. The music doesn't swell with triumph, it stutters like a heartbeat skipping. That's the film trying to tell us that revenge doesn't break cycles, it just changes who holds the knife. Which is unfortunate because it's the Klan we're talking about here, but it was very evident from the flashback scene that it was nothing he wanted more than to be a good father. I think what makes it work is how personal it all feels. We've all been in situations where we had to choose between what's right and what keeps us safe. Sinners just turns that everyday moral compromise up to 11. That confrontation scene between Smoke and Grace over her husband is brutal because neither one is completely wrong or completely right. They're just two people stuck in a system that rewards cruelty trying to justify their choices. And that's why the ending lands the way that it does. There's no big speech about how good prevails over evil, just a bunch of dead people and a few remaining survivors. Yeah, it's depressing as hell, but it also is weirdly hopeful because recognizing the problem is the first step to fixing it. The film's whole point seems to be that we can't change these systems until we admit that we are a part of them. So yeah, when people call Sinners a horror movie, they're not wrong. But the real horror isn't just the vampires, it's realizing there are no easy answers, and the scariest monsters might be the ones we helped create. Not exactly the feel-good message Hollywood usually goes for, which is exactly why this film matters. But I also feel like it's important to touch on the fact that this movie is just fun. There's been 1,000,005 think pieces released on social media since the release of this film, and even I'm guilty of it myself throughout this video, but that's because this film gives you a lot to chew on. Some of what I said may be accurate and some of it may be reaching, but the bottom line is it's been a minute since we've seen a picture create 1,000 words, and I think that's exactly what the public needed. In a world filled with reboots and MCU sequels, I feel like this movie restored the feeling of movie magic that's been missing for so long. But that being said, on a less serious note, I also like Sinners because it never forgets it's just a movie. This movie is a lot of fun if you haven't seen it yet. Also, if you made it this far into the video without seeing it yet, you're kind of crazy, but fuck it, you might as well finish the video. Some less important things I wanted to show some love to are things like the tech behind this film. Michael B. Jordan playing two characters the entire time during the film might have been the best implementation that I've ever seen of this tech. It really felt like we were dealing with twins and not some cheap AI or CG. And if you're a goner, it's a lot of freaky shit in this movie too, literally and figuratively. I mean, you got people spitting in each other's mouths, they out here dishing out back shots after formulating voodoo spells, and more bloody violence than you can handle. Also, I mentioned it earlier, but Smoke kills a bunch of Klan members. I mean, come on, 10 out of 10 killing the KKK. When he shot down all them Klan members with that Tommy gun, muscles bulging and shit, I was sitting in the movie theater like,
you gonna make me act up. You don't make me do something I'm gonna regret.
Now, because this film has a good mixture of entertainment and food for thought, I think that's why this film is breaking records. I believe it did 100 million on its opening weekend or by the second weekend. And from my understanding, it's had the best opening weekend for an original IP in 10 years, which is scaring Hollywood studios because Ryan Coogler worked out a deal to where he gets full ownership of the film's rights eventually. But Unfortunately, mainstream media once again is trying to undersell this accomplishment with their microaggressions.
Reading from The Guardian, you're widely considered the highest grossing black director in history. Your film Black Panther became the highest grossing film of all time, directed by an African-American director, grossing over $1.3 billion.
A lot of my business success has been put in the context of me being black. I think that's a part of it. The issue when people write about, you know, what my films have done. You know, I'll say this: the year Panther 1 came out. Yes, it was the highest grossing film ever made by a black person. It was also the highest grossing film domestically that year made by anybody.
There was even a video that went viral from a content creator complaining that there was no Latino representation in that film. And I saw a lot of people jump on him, rightfully so. But to be fair to the Latino community, it was only his dumb ass crying about it. So make sure y'all point y'all frustrations in the right direction, which is him and not the entire community. But since we're here, I'm gonna go ahead and answer the question for you. There were no Latinos in Sinners because that film is a timepiece set in deep Mississippi. Y'all just weren't there. As someone with family down there, y'all barely there now in 2025. So I don't understand why that person thought there would be mad Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and Dominicans in Sinners shouting,
I know black, imposible, I know black, I'm Dominican, I'm Puerto Rican.
All in all, if you haven't seen the movie yet, what are you waiting for? I cannot recommend Sinners enough. It's probably the best film I've seen since Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is one of those movies I hope inspires film students to get back to the essence of filmmaking instead of trying to franchise everything off of the jump. It's a breath of fresh air that restores that movie magic that's been missing for a couple of years. If you've got a 70mm IMAX showing in your town, that is the best way to experience the film. But if you don't trip, because either way you're gonna have a good time. Regardless if you saw the normal version or the 70mm, I think we all can agree we left the movie theater thinking,
These white men are dangerous.
But hey, I'm just saying. I'm also just saying, if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and check out my previous video on the many victims of P. Diddy. It went pretty viral, and I think it's because I did a lot of research that's not going to show up in most other videos because I wasn't trying to rush and be first to market. I was just trying to get it right. Also, if you want to watch another video of me talking about film, I mentioned Sinners might be the best film I've seen since Everything Everywhere All at Once. I did a video on that movie, and if you haven't heard or seen of it, a link to that video as well as my Diddy video will be on the screen. Click one of the cards, nerds.